Well, good morning everybody, it's Philly here again, and I'm pleased to be walking in Devon, virtual tour, and today I'm in a small village called Uffculme, and in fact I'm not in the village at the moment, I'm just outside, and Uffculme is in the southwest of England in the county of Devon, and I'm at the first place of interest on today's walk, which is BRIDWELL Park and House. And this is the ornamental lake that is part of the house. And it's a lovely morning, it's quite calm, and there's a bit of blue sky about, and there isn't very much wind. So I'm starting this walk this morning to show you a very, very fine house as the beginning of our walk, and we will finish the walk with another fine house in Uffculme. So this is BRIDWELL House. It's a grade 1 listed Georgian house built in Regency style by Richard Hall Clark, I should say, somewhere between 1774 and 1779. And the Clark family owned the entire estate from as far back as the 1600s. And it overlooks the lovely ornamental lake that I've just walked up from, and it really is a sight to behold. The grandeur, the settings, the deer park, it really is something, and it's just on the outskirts of the village. So I'm going to take a walk around to the side now, because there is a chapel which I want to spend a couple of minutes looking at. They put an electric fence all the way around here. Whether that's to keep the deer out or us out, I'm not sure. And it's a popular spot for people to come and sit out, have a coffee, bring their kids, enjoy the outdoors. It's really lovely. The last time I was here, because this is a deer park, there were a lot of deer just over by these trees in the foreground here. Probably 30 or 40, I should think. I think they're over the far side now, which is a shame. It'd be nice to catch a few shots of them. And you can see they've put wooden frames around a lot of the trees to stop the deer from taking the bark off or damaging the trees in some way. So coming up on the left, we have an old chapel. On the left, by the way, is what they call the orangery, and in fact the house is used now as a wedding venue, events and conferences, etc. So it's a wonderful place to come and get married, or come to a convention or conference. Not that they are possible at the moment, but hopefully they soon will be. And just coming up to the chapel now, and it's so nice to see the spring blossom coming out. I have a piece of music on my music channel called Urban Blossoms, which I took last spring, featuring a lot of the blossoms coming out in and around Tiverton. So here's the chapel, and once again it's a lovely building, and the basic history is that it was built in the Gothic style, and it was dedicated to St. Bridget, who apparently is one of Ireland's patron saints. It was never consecrated, apparently, and later it was used as kind of a little museum for artifacts brought back from the seafaring days of Captain Cook, which is really kind of interesting but a bit bizarre as well. But it's quite lovely, and get up a bit closer. Those of you who've watched my Tiverton walks will probably know by now that I'm sort of getting into doors, and this is one hell of a lovely door, isn't it? And of course the arch as well, which just gives it a lovely setting for wedding portraits. And so here we have a Gothic chapel. So I can't really leave Bridwell Park without showing you this other absolute majestic structure. We looked at the house, but to me this tree is every bit as majestic and beautiful as that house. And I want to introduce you to a little something which you all know about, but perhaps not familiar with the term. It's called Geomancy. Geo means earth, mancy means divination. And you know, when we have those kinds of connections that we can't quite understand, but they seem to make sense and they seem to bring us a better understanding of something we might be pondering or wondering about or trying to get an answer to. Geomancy is a way of nature, or if you like, universal conscious, communicating with us, giving a message to us. And the patterns that we see in nature start to give us clues as how we may be able to resolve a problem, move forward, or get an insight into something. So, a little test for you. I want you to have a look at this wonderful tree trunk, and more specifically the bark. And as you can see, it is an absolutely magnificent tree. And as I pull out a little bit, you can start to look at the bark in a little bit more detail, perhaps. And it may well be that you can actually start to see some patterns in the bark. And those patterns might just mean something different to each and every one of us. And the longer we look and the more we let our mind kind of merge with the texture and the structure of the tree, the more we start to see things. And more information makes itself available to us. And nature starts to communicate with us. Whether it's a marvellous tree trunk like this, or whether it's the movement of a bird, or whether it's the flight of an insect, or the appearance of a butterfly. But I'm sure you'll be able to see some patterns in this bark that form into shapes that just raise your awareness and make you realize that the patterns and the shapes can come alive and they can provide messages to us. So apart from appreciating the natural beauty of this tree, which is quite stunning, the more I look up at it, through the branches, and this beautiful tree trunk, it just goes right up to the sky. Contained within the bark is information, knowledge, wisdom, and knowing. So if you see anything, leave me a comment in the comments section below the video and tell me what the tree and the bark said to you and showed you within its patterns. And with that, we'll leave Bridwell Park and carry on with our walk. Okay, so I've arrived in the village and I'm heading towards St Mary's Church, which is coming up on the right hand side. Has a wonderful spire and many treasures to behold inside. We can even enjoy some spring blossom. Isn't that a wonderful sight? So St Mary's Church was founded in Saxon times and is mentioned in a charter in 1136, and we're going to go inside and have a look at one or two of the features inside now. So I'm now inside the church, and what a wonderful church it is. The oldest part of the church is these columns, and they date back to the 13th and 14th century. I think there is a little notice on here which says that the foot of this column is 15th century and can be seen displaced sections of the pillar from the 13th century colonnade. So you can see at the bottom here a much older part of the column, 13th century. That's really quite extraordinary, isn't it? Also just down here we've got the octagonal font, and it was installed in 1843, and it's absolutely spectacular, isn't it? Just panning around and looking down now to this, what's known as a rood screen, R-O-O-D, and get a lovely view of the stained glass window at the end. And this rood screen, a portion of it dates back to the 15th century, and there's two chapels behind there, and apparently this rood screen, which is just fantastic, is the longest one in any church in Devon. It's really quite spectacular, isn't it? It's not bright sunshine at the moment, so we're not getting the best effect of the stained glass window. If it was really bright and sunny, it would be absolutely glorious, but it still is glorious, isn't it? So I wanted to come in and just show you some of the lovely features of this church, and I'm going to leave by this side door, and there is also a wonderful wooden panel here as well, and it's a bit dark in here, but that's just You can see also this beautifully decorated wooden panel with coats of arms and figures, and it really is quite marvellous. Heading out to the side door of the church now through the belfry. So now as I walk out of the churchyard, I'm walking across the road here, and there's another fine house right opposite the church, and it says church house, so it must have been the rectory, presumably, of the church at some point. But again, a very nice, beautiful house. So walking back now up to the centre of the village. It was noisy when I got here, but it's gone a bit quiet now, which is good. So this is one of the main streets of the village, you could say. And I met a lady called Jennie, who's the secretary of the local history society, and she told me that this street was full of commerce and shops once upon a time, and you can kind of imagine it, can't you, really? And you can see the kind of the shop fronts and stuff that were here. This one on the right is particularly interesting. We've got a cat who's obviously quite interested too, and hello. Hello then. Hello. How are you? So we have a cat here who is sort of saying hello, but in this window is quite interesting because whoever lives here is quite a Lewis Carroll fan, because we've got Alice in Wonderland and different memorabilia here of that wonderful author. And clearly it was a shop at one point, and it's got a very fine frontage still, and I'm not sure what it was, but it's really lovely. And the cat wants to visit with me, and they have a doll's house here, which has a little sign on it that says stay at home, protect the NHS, which is kind of nice. So moving on down. So as I head around the corner here, I'm confronted by an absolutely astounding building. A sort of building you wouldn't expect to see in a small village. So here we have the FURZE Brewery. It was built between 1858 and 1903, and it was originally a brewery and malt house. And then eventually it got used for cider making, and sadly now it has no use, or is not being used for any kind of commercial purposes. Now, some of the FURZE family actually expanded their brewery empire into London and the north, and they were very influential, and they were shareholders in the CULM Valley Railway and helped that to expand. So they had made a massive contribution to the area, and of course were employers as well. Now, the story goes that the younger FURZE had a scientific mind, it says, and he he wrote several papers, and these were observations on the fermentation process. So he was quite an entrepreneur and a scientist in a way. And this theme kind of fits in with the Tiverton town walks I did, where we talked about John Heathcote being an inventor, an entrepreneur, an industrialist. And it's certainly the case here in Uffculme as well. And he married and had 8 children, and they all came into the family business. And it's an extraordinary building, isn't it, really? And I will show you a picture of what the interior would have looked like, an old black and white picture. This gives you some idea, but it's quite an extraordinary building, really, and it stands out in what is really quite a small village. While I'm down here, I thought I'd take a quick shot of Uffculme Library, which I didn't see when I came a few days ago, but it also is quite a majestic building, and I'm quite interested really in the origin of the bell tower there, and it's got a wonderful arch and little ornate column there. So that's now Uffculme Library. So back on the trail now, and coming up past the brewery again, which is such an imposing building, isn't it? And we're coming back towards the centre of the village. If we look out over, you can see the CULM Valley there. It's really quite lovely out through there. If I just pan around again at the building from this side, you can see the couple of big entrances there for loading and unloading, I presume. Some of the windows have been bricked up now, but you get some semblance of the height and the imposing nature of the building on the village. Good morning. I'm going to stop here for a second because we have the old butcher shop. Private house now, I imagine, but what's interesting is the block and tackle above the shop. Presumably that was used to haul carcasses or to offload or whatever. Whether it's been reinstated there, I'm not sure, but it's a lovely feature of a lovely property. I love the iron railing work as well. In the front, you can just imagine the meats, etc. in the windows, can't you? Lovely. And the house next door has got this lovely wisteria, which I'm sure will be in full bloom in a couple of months or so. And now we're in the village square. Room for a bit of parking, and we have kind of a nice wooden structure here, which is kind of a shelter, somewhere to sit, and some effort's been made to landscape it, which is lovely. And look at the timber work there. It's really a lovely construction. I'm not sure how old it is, but it really is a lovely feature of the village square, isn't it? And up above is a rather forlorn looking flag with a few frayed edges, and that is the Devon flag, the green and black and white. So Devon has its own sort of county flag, you could call it. Cornwall has one as well, and so I suppose Devon decided they would adopt one as well. Over this side we have the old bank, which again is now a private house. Kind of indicative of the fact that the banks have systematically withdrawn from our communities and disappeared into the ether. And we have, of course, the village pub. This is the Ostler Inn, and it's a free house. Free house meaning that they can buy their beers from whoever they want, and kind of quiet at the moment, this time of the morning, but and of course we're still in lockdown, so we look forward to the time when we can all get back into the pubs and socialise. Well, I've been to the bank and I've been to the pub. I guess we got that in the right order, and now I'm heading down to the old Uffculme Valley railway line, which is now a very pleasant walk. So this would have been a lovely train ride, wouldn't it, through the Uffculme Valley, and like so many of the other little branch lines that were part of the network all closed down, I've always felt when you're on a train you get a greater appreciation of the countryside than when you're in a car. And we're now down in the valley, just a little bit up from the mill itself. It really is very pleasant this morning, and the sky is getting clearer. It looks like we've got another bench with a bit of a memorial on it. Lovely bunch of photographs, bunch of daffodils in remembrance of Anne Reid and Beryl, 2016. So coming up to the end of this part of the Uffculme Valley Railway, and in front of us is the magnificent Harbour Mill. And you can see here they have a community open space project here, and you can see the old water, the mill water coming through, and this whole project is ongoing, and when I get around the other side I'll show you what they're planning to do. So we have Uffculme railway path here. This footway follows the track of the old CULM Valley railway line, which closed in 1975. The last passenger train was on the 7th of September 1963. The line was opened in 1876. It says, use this path to walk to the village centre and to the medieval parish church, parts of which date back to the 13th century. Well, we've been to that church, and we've looked at the rood screen and the ceilings, etc. And it's kind of lovely that it's been preserved, and it's now a lovely sort of country walk, really. So volunteers have been working on this for quite some time to gradually turn it back into a lovely community regeneration. They're going to regenerate the mill pond, and as you can see already, they've started to put picnic benches in, and the whole area is being regenerated as a lovely amenity for the locals, and it's called Project Splash. And it aims to regenerate the very overgrown mill pond and leat at Cold Harbour Mill Museum, restore its capacity to drive the mill's water wheel and spinning machines and the vital uninterrupted water flow for the steam engines. It will create a lasting educational, wildlife-rich linkage for the heritage landscape of the CULM Valley. What a lovely project that is, and they've got some drawings here of how they intend it to look. So this is a wonderful project. Now, just turning around and having a quick look across to the mill itself. There is so much history here, it's just too much to cover in this walk, so I am going to come back later and do the mill as an exclusive walk. When it opens up later in the year, they have open days where they actually fire up the steam engines and get all the equipment working. It was built in 1824 and was originally a corn mill, and there's been apparently a mill on this site since medieval times, which is phenomenal, really, and it's even mentioned in the Domesday Book. And the name Cold Harbour is supposed to mean old shelter, and it was originally powered by water wheels, and then eventually they put in steam engines. So it's got a fantastic history, and it links up with the whole wool and textile lace making industry that we can link together with the Tiverton walks I've done with the John Heathcote family, etc. So I will be back later to do a virtual walk of Cold Harbour Mill when it's all fired up, running, and the steam engines are going. That will be exciting. So I'm coming up to the last wonderful building to show you on this walk today, and as you can see already, it's set in, it has a lovely setting overlooking the CULM Valley, and I'm hoping to meet Russell here this morning, who's going to tell me a little bit about this lovely building and show me around it a little bit, hopefully, and that will finish up my walk for today.
enough, yeah.
So this is Russell, who's with the Residents Association. I'm really pleased to meet him this morning, and he's going to just show me around this lovely house and pick out a few features for me. So Russell, you've lived here a long time?
17 years, yeah.
Okay, yeah, and it used to be owned by one family, and it was just a family home, I presume, but in recent years it's been divided up, is that right?
Well, in 1949 it was converted from a very large Victorian gentleman's residence into what you see today.
What you see today.
Basically, including the lodge and the bungalow at the top, there's 17 different residences.
Are there?
Yeah.
17? Wow,
yeah.
Wow.
So it's all divided up, and with the gardens and grounds portioned out to the various houses.
I noticed when I came in that there's some lovely gardens on the left-hand side as you come down the drive.
They belong to the various people who
do they
have properties in here. Yeah.
Okay.
The gardens are not attached to their houses.
They're not.
No, but
and it was built in the 1800s, yeah.
1864 it was built. Yeah.
1864.
So originally built by the vicar of Uffculme.
Yep.
There's a chap called George Marker.
Okay.
He acquired half the land from the Fox brothers, who owned Uffculme Mill.
Right.
And then, which he kept for a few years, and then he acquired.
You're talking about Code Harbour Mill there,
yeah,
the Fox brothers, yeah.
The Woolen Mill, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he purchased that first chunk of land. Then the second chunk of land he purchased some years later and combined them together, and then eventually got round to building this great house. Although
so his lands would extend right the way down to the river.
To the Leat.
To the Leat.
Yes, and then all the way back up to the vicarage at the far end of that field, and because he lived in the vicarage, you see, he acquired all this land here, which is from the Leat out to Cold Harbour. The difficulty is now, of course, that there's stuff is built all over it, so you can't actually see.
Of course.
And all of these properties here were built on the land facing Commercial Road. That was all sold off to individual plots, except that grey house. That house was actually built by George Marker to accommodate one of his, he wasn't an employee on the land, but he worked for Marker, I think as a land agent or something, and he built that house for him, which must have been a tied property.
Okay, got that, yeah.
And also the house was later built by somebody else, but I don't know who.
Okay.
So, yes, he built this, I think in order to retire, but the funny thing was that he remained vicar for another 20 years after the house was built, so he hung on really. But coming to the war, because I've sent you the blurb on the American Army, didn't I?
You have, yes. Well, which I will include that on the description box in the video.
Here, this whole field from where those barns are, etc.
Yes.
All the way down, as far as you can go down to the bottom, the whole of that was in one huge encampment of US forces.
Wow. And
the officers occupied this building here, and some senior NCOs. The rest were all in Nissen huts and tents out here, and all the other little buildings, outbuildings and stuff, were converted into cookhouse and all the other, and a dairy and all the various other things.
And why were they here?
Well, they were here obviously on the build-up to go for D-Day. So they arrived by sea. They arrived in Scotland for some reason, and then they came. Well, I suppose they probably took that northern sea route, which was a bit safer from northern USA across from Halifax, Nova Scotia, probably across to Scotland, which is a safer route, and then came down by train.
We had a lot of American soldiers over here. Of course, there was the tragedy down at Slapton Sands, wasn't there?
That's right.
Yeah.
So
can we have another walk around that side of the house?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Can you just lead on?
Can't go. That doesn't go anywhere.
Okay, you
So
lead.
need to go
You
around
lead
this
on
way.
then.
Yeah. So after the war, the MOD or whoever they were at the War Office gave the property back to the owners. Who were the Worthington family,
Okay.
and but of course the old lady, Mrs. Worthington, had died in 1939,
Right.
and her two sons didn't want it, so it was sold to the building developers called Crookshanks, who set about dividing it up into individual properties. But when she died in 1939, Mrs. Worthington lived here with about 18 servants, all on her own. So she was...
Wow. So she was the local eccentric. Was she?
well, not really, no. She
No?
was very much the lady of the manor. I mean, she supported absolutely everything from the, the Mothers Union to the guides and, yeah, so you see this here was, this was the garage, the old coach house.
Okay.
And
Beautiful, isn't it?
originally was the where they used to go in here.
Yeah. Bring the horses in.
Yeah, you see, and originally this went in line with pillar, but with the advent of the motor car, this piece was created. But this then, although was just an outbuilding, when the Worthingtons with their Rolls Royce, they couldn't get round this corner and get in there, so they knocked the wall out of here.
Right.
And used that as the garage.
Wow.
So, and then...
A garage fit for a Rolls Royce.
Well, these were just farm outbuildings, and you can see, well, not that one's not a good example, but this one here, you see with this massive great stone lintel across there.
Of course, yeah.
This was a big all open fronted barn.
Wow.
And so these are all outbuildings. This house on there was built to accommodate Mrs. Worthington, Mrs. Marker, and that they had this building built, and she lived in there.
Don't you just love the porthole windows?
Yeah.
They're wonderful, aren't they?
And the farm manager occupied that big house in the corner,
Okay.
and that was his workshop.
Oh,
But
wow.
has been incorporated into the
course.
property.
Yeah.
This one over here in the far corner, all that portion there was occupied by the butler and so on, and that huge
Really?
chimney up there, underneath that are bread ovens and things.
Let's see if I can get those. Yeah. There were bread ovens underneath that chimney. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's why the thing's so huge. It's got
Yeah.
a lot of cooking facilities in there, because that would have been part of the main kitchens and that for the big house.
Part of the kitchens and
But
bakery.
a lot of these other bits, like that garage there, is an add-on that's built later.
Okay. Yeah, you can see it
Yeah.
looks a
And
bit.
this is the granary, which was the barn, and you can see where they would have had access up the stone steps.
Oh, it's a beautiful building, isn't it? Just gorgeous.
And then all of these were just little outbuildings.
Yeah.
But you can see that's an extension, a modern extension.
Yeah.
You can tell by the different stonework.
It fits in though very well,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
and this
Yeah.
porch on the front of here is
Yeah.
an add-on.
Yeah.
That,
But these little porthole windows seem to be a feature, don't they?
yes.
There's one up there and there's one up there.
I think almost every house has got them. You see that one there?
Yeah.
There was one there. There's
Yeah.
one up there. We've got one in number 14.
Yeah.
And there was a big duck pond in the middle of here.
Was there a duck pond? Oh wow.
And this was, as I say, the farm manager had that house, and I think this one, one of these was a dairy, and
And they've still got the leaden windows there, haven't they? And
yeah, so well, they were. Some were original and some were more modern, like a lot of these.
yes,
Other ones.
Yeah.
When the developers took over, they put in all sorts of windows.
yeah,
And of course, bearing in mind in 1949, a lot of building supplies were very almost unobtainable, so they scrounged a lot of stuff and they reused a lot of stuff.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of the tiles, you'll notice, they don't match
No,
because they really had to use what they could get hold of. And
they've weathered in though, haven't they, over the years?
yeah, well,
yeah,
it is what it is, really.
Yeah.
It's all listed now, so they can't change it anyway.
yeah.
But this bit on the corner here, this is a modern bit, which was added by the Worthington family. Now, I don't know if you can see, right up on top there, it's a little hut, a little box.
Aha.
Yeah, well, when Mrs. Worthington got quite elderly in the 1930s, they installed a lift, an electric elevator in there, so she could get upstairs.
Wow.
And that little square box at the top held the winding gear for the motor for the lift. And this corner, this concrete rough cast corner, it was all built to accommodate extra rooms and the lift and everything.
Wow.
Which, in a way, sort of spoilt it, really.
A little bit, because the original stonework's so lovely, isn't it? As you say.
Yeah, I think so.
The house.
But also the design of the piece on the corner is not brilliant, is it? I
No.
mean, it's a bit sort of.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
And yeah, so this is basically it, really.
Okay. Well, do you know, that's been fascinating, and particularly the information about the billeting of the American soldiers here,
I
and
think
and
there's
the
probably more information about that somewhere in the Devon archives or somewhere.
Yeah.
There must be.
yeah,
As to who was who. I mean, I've written some of it down, and I managed to get some photographs from a chap in New York, but he's long dead now, but because I've had them for many years, and he sent me these photographs, which were taken from their. They kept the regiment kept a journal, and they wrote it all down, and they added to it. So a lot of these photographs of the guys camping out in the fields and the parade and everything, that was all. These are taken from their archives, but what's happened to that, I don't know. Now you can see that's giving you a good example. If we walk back down here. Now you can see just go to this corner. Right. Now, can you see
just get a close up of the
that one there?
Just get a close up of the picture there. Yeah.
Well, that cottage there is there with its open front, you see.
We'll just get into the picture again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Got that.
And this one here had a big high wall here, and that's that cottage there with
Okay.
the gate and the high wall. But this was used as the cookhouse for the Americans.
Wow.
And this was an open barn, you can see.
Yes. 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 You
Yeah,
can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
There's the old sentry at the lodge.
Changed a heck of a lot, is it? In a sense, you can notice the notice the similarities, can't
I
you?
think you can. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can notice what it all is, and approve it.
Well, Russell, that's been a fantastic tour of the building, and you've pulled out so many really lovely features.
Well, it's a very long thing, and it got, obviously, you know, if you sat down and went through the thing at all, you'd make an enormous great program, but of course it would bore everybody to death because it wouldn't.
So that brings this walk to an end, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and now you know a little bit more about the little village of Uffculme. And there's links and more information in the information box below this video if you want to explore a little bit more about some of the historical points of interest that we've talked about and looked at this morning. So until next time, bye for now.